Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth, the Education Coordinator for Marlene's Market and Deli. Tonight's special guest that we have with us in honor of our local Farmer Spotlight edition this month, we have Rawley Johnson of Early Bird Farm. He is the farmer and co-owner, and we are so grateful to have him with us. Thank you so much, Rawley.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Some wonderful information to share with us tonight.
Yeah, I'm not super tech savvy, so I can see that I got my presentation up. Does that mean my face is on the screen as well? Can you guys see me?
We do not see you, but if you turn on your camera, we should be able to see you.
All right. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to figure that out. Let's see. Oops. Wonder if this will. Okay, so that goes back to the presentation slideshow. I'm really not good on the computer. I think I'm going to just give my presentation and then hopefully you guys will see me soon. Let's see.
Yes.
I go back to Zoom here. I'm sharing my screen. Okay.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Should be on
We
video.
can see you.
Okay. You can see me now?
Yes.
All right. Well, I saw that some of my CSA members were here in the audience today. I saw Marcy and Leah and Homer, so that's cool. Thanks for coming, guys. Yeah, so I'm Rawley and I'm the owner of Early Bird Farm. I'm gonna take you through a slideshow that shows you the ins and outs of how we raise our chickens on our farm and how we integrate them with our vegetable operation. And I'm gonna do a big shout out to Marlene's Market because they are our one and only wholesale partner for our little farm. And it's been an amazing relationship for many years selling our eggs to Marlene. So I appreciate Elizabeth for giving me this opportunity to share a little more about what we do. I would also say, you know, there's going to be a Q&A at the end, but there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff. So if you guys want to raise your hand or write something in the chat or even just interrupt me, I'm happy to answer questions as I go and we can kind of focus on what you guys are interested in too. So what is the best way to get back to my...
Oh, maybe Safari?
Is it still up? It is up on Safari. Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You can tell I don't do this very often. All right. So as I said, I own Early Bird Farm. Here's some fun pictures of the veggies we grow. I currently, in the current iteration of our farm, we're here in the Puyallup Valley, really close to Marlene's, literally a 12-minute drive from the store. We grow about 2 acres of vegetables on a 10-acre farm. The rest of the land is either resting in cover crop or just in permanent pasture or has some of our buildings. Currently, we're exclusively a CSA farm. So if you want to get our vegetables, you have to join our CSA. It's actually a 140 share per week CSA that starts in June and now goes 22 weeks all the way to November. So we're right in the thick of it. This was week 12 of our CSA. And that is really what we do. A CSA is a subscription to our farm. So you sign up in the spring and every week we deliver a box of veggies. Fresh from the farm, whatever's, there's a picture there of one of our shares with the carrots in the middle and the broccoli and the scallions. It's a mix of whatever's fresh. I send out a newsletter to our customers with recipe ideas and some stories from the farm to inspire you. So that's what we do. We used to do the farmers markets in Seattle. We've done Tacoma farmers markets in the past. But especially with COVID and the pandemic, folks are really looking for a grab and go option. So the CSA has really like more than doubled in size since the beginning of COVID. So that is what we do right now. We also recently got certified naturally grown, which is a small farm alternative to organics certification. We do everything that an organic farm does. The only difference is instead of being inspected by a certified organic inspector, we actually get inspected by a peer or a peer farmer. So it's a peer-to-peer inspection program. I get to see other people's certified naturally grown farms. They get to see mine. It's a little bit easier for a small farmer in terms of paperwork and cost, a little bit more feasible. And we really like it. And so it's a stamp of approval that everything we're doing is in parallel with organic standards. I haven't gotten our eggs certified, only the vegetables, although our eggs go beyond organic standards and we use only organic feed. Let's see. So the star of the show tonight, other than my son Everett, is our chickens. And our eggs are what we sell to Marlene's market. And so currently we've got about 450 chickens in 2 different flocks. You can see in the 2 pictures, there's different breeds. We have a 1-year-old flock and a 2-year-old. The flocks are a year apart, and each flock is a different breed. So if the hens ever get mixed up, it's really easy to tell that, oops, that barred rock got in the flock with the black stars, and we can just catch them at night and put them back where they belong. So 2 flocks, about 450 chickens out on the pasture. And that's what I'm mostly going to talk about today. So we are a true family farm. That's my wife, Rebecca, when our son Clayton was born last summer. Everett is 5 now. Rebecca works off the farm. She's actually a pediatrician at Pediatrics Northwest. She's in the Federal Way office. So we're a farmer doctor team. And it works pretty well. Every farm I've worked on in the past has been the husband and wife running the farm together. But I don't know how they pull that off. It would sound really stressful for me to be running a business with my wife. So I actually like that we have separate jobs, but we share the farm and the family together. So that's us. It's a little picture of us. But before I get to Marlene's and my crew, whoa. I do want to say that we feel really lucky that we found this farm back in 2013. We used an organization called Washington Farm Link that tries to link older farmers who are looking to sell with young farmers who are looking to buy. And we were just in the right place at the right time. And we found this property, and the previous owners who had run a little U-pick hobby farm here really wanted to see this property stay in agriculture and not turn into another horse ranch or development. So we actually did an owner financing deal. We hired a lawyer and we shook hands, and they gave us 5 years to refinance with the real bank, and we made it happen. So we feel really fortunate to be here, and it all happened before real estate prices went through the roof. So I feel really lucky that we were able to pull it off. We do, had some support from family to help us with the down payment and make it all happen. So really happy to be here doing what we do. This is a photo. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the Marlene's team. These are some folks from Marlene's who were just out at our farm in June, seeing what we do. We've been selling eggs to Marlene's almost from the beginning. I think it's been 6 or 7 years now. And they buy our surplus. What doesn't go to the farmer's market, what doesn't go to the CSA, I can always count on Marlene's to put it on the shelves, and it always sells. Our eggs always sell out. There's never enough to meet the demand. But I will say that Marlene's has always been understanding and flexible. When I'm short 1 week, or if I have a surplus, they'll always take more, take less. They understand that, especially an egg producer, it's hard to have the same amount of eggs every week, and they just get it, and they work with me, and they're happy to have our eggs in the store. So it's been a great relationship. So I just wanted to give that shout out before I go any further. I'll stop there for a minute, but do you guys have any questions about anything I've said so far? I guess, is everything coming through? Can you guys hear me okay, Elizabeth?
Oh, yes, everything sounds great. I'm checking the chat box here too.
All
I don't think anyone
right.
has any questions at this point.
Great. So one thing I learned how to farm as an intern, as an apprentice on 3 different farms in California and Washington. And I was not a farmer growing up. I lived in the suburbs. You never even had a garden. I was a school teacher in my 20s actually. And I didn't even start working on a farm until I turned 30. So now that I own my own farm, I also run an internship because I am trying to train the next generation of farmers who are going to go off and start their own farms and kind of grow the movement. So our crew, I've got 3 women. These are the women on my helping me run the farm this year. Every year it's a different crew, and it's always just beginning farmers who I train from the ground up. This year's crew, Corrine was a ER nurse before she came to the farm. Catherine's taking a gap year off of college as an environmental studies major. And Rachel was actually a mechanical engineer who decided she didn't want to be an engineer. So we've got a really diverse crew who've come to us from far and wide to work here on the farm. And so I actually want to take a step back in this presentation. And one of my motivations for raising chickens the right way is because, as many of you know, most eggs are produced in CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations. They're raised in these massive warehouses, 10,000 birds in a building. They never see the light of day. Even the free range, quote unquote, eggs that you see as certified organic, in most cases, they just have access to pasture, which means they have like a little door to a tiny little yard that they probably never even go outside to. So unfortunately, some of the labeling and misinformation, it's very hard to find an egg from a chicken at a grocery store that actually was a chicken who was raised the right way, living outside on pasture where they naturally want to be. But not only that, even organic farms, vegetable growers, most of us use poultry manure as a fertilizer to grow our vegetables. So I have this Nutri-Rich bag here. You might have seen it at the garden store. If you buy poultry manure, it's certified organic, 100% organic. It says on the bag, but one of these CAFOs is where that fertilizer came from. So even organic farms are using the byproducts of industrial ag and non-organic farming to grow their vegetables in many cases. And that I call the stinky secret of organic farming because it's not talked about a lot. But one of my motivations for growing chickens is so that we could actually grow our own fertilizer for our vegetables, raising our chickens right and using their manure to help grow our vegetables. So, but I will say that, if I'm talking to future farmers out there, I always say that raising chickens is not for everyone. And the talk that I gave this winter to a bunch of aspiring farmers, I laid out a bunch of the realities of being a chicken farmer, a poultry farmer. And I'm not going to go into it all here, but it's not for everyone. It really ties you down to the farm. The chickens never take a day off. You gotta be here. And if you want to go on vacation, you got to find a really good farm sitter who's willing to take care of your 500 hens. So it's a major commitment to raise animals on a vegetable farm. But we're really committed to it. And we are now a decade into this and still going. So yeah, there was my pros and cons for farmers. How did I get off on this crazy mission? Well, I told you I interned on farms. I was at Full Belly Farm, a 400-acre amazing organic farm down in California for a couple of years. Finn River is out on the Olympic Peninsula. I slaughtered my first chicken there. So I was on these farms who were doing poultry, raising their own grain, doing all kinds of amazing stuff. And I got some confidence as an intern that I could do it myself. So when I came up to Washington to work at Local Roots Farm out in the Snoqualmie Valley, I convinced the farmers to let me get 500 baby chicks and raise them on their farm and sell the eggs to their CSA members. So this is me, my very first year. picking up the baby chicks from the post office. They come 100 in a box. You go to the post office at 5 in the morning and grab them. And I learned a lot that first year. Made a lot of mistakes, spent way too long washing eggs, but started raising chickens on my own. And you know, to get this business started with 500 hens, it cost me about $15,000 before I saw a single egg to sell. So it was definitely an investment, especially for a young guy like me who didn't have a lot of money. I just kind of went for it, knowing that I probably wasn't going to make a lot of money on the enterprise, but I did it anyway. I did have to buy an egg washing machine after that first year. I did have to buy a tractor to move around chicken feed and a shipping container to store it because with 500 hens, I just couldn't do it all by hand. But I really had to go back to figure out how to raise chickens like this. I had to go back and do some research about how folks used to do it back in the day. So this book, The Dollar Hen, I found is from 1909. And some of the advice in that book about how to raise chickens out on pasture totally works out here in Washington. And I learned a lot from what folks used to do. And amazingly, I found out after my grandfather passed away that my grandfather taught poultry science at Oregon State University for 1 year. Larry Johnson. I didn't know this because I didn't start farming until after he passed away. But my grandma gave these pamphlets that he wrote back in the day. And yes, I did actually have a problem with cannibalism. My chickens were actually killing each other my first year. And my grandpa's pamphlet from 1955 actually helped me figure out what was going wrong. So it's pretty incredible, but I do have a little bit in my blood going back a couple generations. So all this is to say, I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of raising chickens, but I don't make a lot of money on the eggs. I make a profit, but barely, mostly just cover my expenses. I'm mostly a vegetable farmer. That's where we really make our money, but I don't lose money selling eggs. Even though they're expensive eggs, if you go to Marlene's, it costs $10 to buy them. The cost of feed is really high, and so organic feed. So I don't actually make much money on the eggs, but they fertilize our fields and they grow amazing vegetables. So I really feel like it's worth having the chickens. I'm going to skip some of these slides, but let me maybe stop there because I've already said a whole bunch about getting the business started. Did you guys have any questions that come to mind about that sort of the origin story of me raising chickens?
I think that's incredible that your grandfather, you know, was on that path and you had no idea, and then you know, actually were able to learn from his pamphlets he wrote. That's amazing.
Yeah, he only taught for 1 year and then he went into business and became a banker. So I think that, you know, it was 1955 and agriculture was being industrialized and chickens were, you know, no longer being raised on pasture. So I think that he may have realized that like what he had learned was becoming obsolete. And so it's cool that I'm bringing it back.
Exactly. That's amazing. Oh, we do have a question in the chat box. Homer asks, how did you stop them from eating each other?
Well, actually, it started with the baby chicks. So Homer, this is a good segue. It took me years to realize that chickens, you know, you've heard the term the pecking order. And chickens can be vicious. If you have 300 hens in a flock, they're going to fight with each other from time to time to establish that pecking. And so I had trouble the first couple of years with hens pecking their tail feathers off. And I was kind of embarrassed because I was raising my hens out on pasture, doing it right, but I had these sad looking hens who had been pecked by the other chickens. And I couldn't figure out what I was doing wrong. And it turned out that I wasn't actually giving them enough space in their brooder when they were baby chicks. So I'm going to fast forward to, so here's the photo of the baby chicks on the first day we get them. we build these Ohio brooders, which, as I put in the slideshow, the Ohio brooder was developed at Ohio State University in the 1940s. It's just one sheet of plywood, and it's like an upside down box. You can see how the heat lamps are actually inside the box, and the chicks can go under the box if they're cold, or they can go outside the box if they're hot. So the number one reason that baby chicks die in a confined environment is they get cold and they all pile up on top of each other and they suffocate. It's not necessarily predators. One time we had an owl get in, and the owl didn't really eat the chicks, but the owl scared them and they all piled up in the corner, and a bunch of them suffocated and died from fright or being suffocated. So you can see for the first couple of days, I build an oval brooder area so there's no corners. They can't all pile up in the corner. And we use these Ohio brooders. But what I learned, Homer, is that if they're kept in this small area for more than a couple of days, they start pecking at each other when they're only a few days old. And then once they develop that habit, it never stops. So I learned to remove that that fencing really quickly and give them more room to roam. So here they are a few weeks later when they get bigger, and we let them roam around the whole greenhouse and have more space to hop up on the roost, etc. So that solved my feather pecking problem. Yeah, so this tunnel we built just for raising baby chicks, but actually it's dual purpose because in the spring, we clean it up and we start vegetable starts in the same tunnel. So that's the exact same tunnel, just a few months later. We clean it up, we scrape out the poultry manure, we add a bunch of wood chips, and we turn those tables into tables for our starts. So it works really well. Now, I'm not going to talk about the nitty gritties of the portable electric fencing, but that's more for a farmer. But I did want to show you some photos of how we move our chickens around the pasture. So the chickens are actually, this is about right where they are right now. Late in the summer, we bring them down to our permanent pasture, lower pasture. It's a couple acres, just like in this photo. And each flock is in a mobile coop on wheels, and they are confined in a portable electric fence. So it's about a quarter acre that they're on at a time. And I've found that they can be in one spot for about 2 weeks before they've pecked it to the dirt. And then if we want to maintain that nice green pasture, we want to keep those chickens moving. So we'll move the coop, we'll move the fences. And because the coop is on wheels, we just hitch it to the tractor and drive it to the next spot. And the fences are 100 feet long, and we can move a fence. One person can move a fence. And the chickens we've trained to go into their roosts at night. So we don't have to herd them in. They just go in there each night. Here I am training the baby chicks their first time to the fence. I let them out when they're about 3 months old. So they're small enough they can't fly over the fence, but they're big enough that they can't just squeeze right through it. So and we have it hot wired, so it's got a real strong shock. Now, not all the chicks get shocked. 1 or 2 of them get zapped, and then they all sort of get the message real quick. So that's how I train them to these portable electric fences. And there's a picture of us moving the coop. The fences also keep predators out. So I'm going to talk about predators in a moment. Some more shots of the pasture. You can see in this photo, they've been there for a few weeks. So you can see how they're really working the grass down to nothing. And that at this point, we'd want to move them to the next spot so they don't denude the grass too much. So there are predators out on the pasture. Here's a list of just a few of them. The coyotes are, originally I would consider them to be our #1 predator, and I was really worried about coyotes. But coyotes' instinct is to tunnel under a fence. They dig under fences, and they're digging, and their noses get zapped. So they quickly learn that they can't dig under our electric fences. And I think they could certainly just jump over a fence, but there's some kind of depth perception issue with these fences where they never even think to jump over a fence. The only time I've seen a coyote get one of our chickens was at a previous farm I worked on. I watched from a distance in broad daylight. This coyote was stalking the chickens around the fence, and it would scare the chickens, and they would get scared and it would flush them out. The chicken would fly up out of the fence. And once the chicken is outside the fenced area, the coyote would just pounce on it. So I was so curious, I actually let the coyote do this once. And then I figured out, oh, that's what they're doing. And then I, of course, shooed the coyote off. But for the most part, we've had very little predation issues. At night, the hens go up and they roost in these coops and the coyotes can't get in there. Hawks are really not an issue. This is a red-tailed hawk that I actually caught in a fishing net with my, by myself. But it was an incredible story because this was actually a red-tailed hawk. I called the animal rescue when I caught this hawk, and they immediately came on Super Bowl Sunday and brought the hawk to their rehab center. And x-rays revealed that this hawk had been shot. And so this hawk had been terrorizing my flock for about a week, and it wouldn't fly away when I would try to shoo it off. And I couldn't figure it out. I figured it was somehow injured. And that is why it had resorted to killing my chickens. It had been shot and it couldn't fly. And so it could only barely sort of hop around and walk. And so its only way to survive was to just hop around and kill my chickens. So they actually rehabbed this hawk and re-released it into the wild. And it was this amazing success story, but it had killed about 8 of my chickens before I managed to catch it. But typically the hawks and eagles are scared of my flocks because I have so many hens. If I just had a few backyard flock, I think we might lose more, but we do keep a few roosters and they're a little bit intimidating to hawks, and just there's so many chickens that the hawks tend to leave our flocks alone. The crows more try to steal eggs than anything else. And I've seen many weasels on our farm. We have the short-tailed weasel. They're really small. And I've seen them catch many rats. In fact, I've seen a weasel catch a rat that was the same size as the weasel. But they don't seem to bother our chickens. I figure you guys might have some questions about predators, so I'm going to stop it there for a minute.
Any questions, folks?
Anybody with backyard chickens or
I actually grew up in the same area that you are in, off of River Road there, and my neighbor, and he still has chickens, but yeah, there would be a lot of times the coyotes would get into the coop and get under the fence, like you said.
Yeah. So, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, you're good.
We actually really like the coyotes because I think they keep other problems like deer and raccoons away from our farm. Raccoons can be a real nuisance, and I think the coyotes hunt enough that they keep the raccoons away. And they seem to have a hold on the territory over the deer as well. So we don't have any deer or raccoons on our farm, and they also eat a lot of rodents. So we really like the coyotes.
That's amazing.
So yeah, the mobile coops, you can see I built them from scratch from an RV trailer frame that I got off of Craigslist for $300. I had a guy weld on a metal floor, and I put the nest boxes on the outside so we don't ever have to go into the coop for collecting eggs. And then you can see their manure falls through the holes in the floor. And so in the winter, when the chickens are in the barn, I power wash this coop out once a year, and it otherwise stays really clean. There's a lot of airflow, and I don't have issues with mites and other insects on my chickens. They really stay clean. We had a researcher from WSU actually check for parasites on my chickens. He was doing this big project, and he was amazed how clean our chickens are. There's the flooring. And yeah, there's a glamour shot out on the pasture. So I'm going to transition here to how we integrate our chickens into the vegetable operation, because that is something that really distinguishes our farm. And I don't know a lot of other farms, or really almost any other farms that do what we do. So that's my next topic. But questions about the hens or the coops or anything before I go to the next topic?
I did put in the chat box, for those of you that are on the Zoom meeting, and I'll be adding it to the live stream here, that y'all use a local chicken feed company called Scratch and Peck, which is available at Marlene's.
Oh yeah, I'm going to talk about, let me go forward to the feed in a minute. I got some feed photos here.
Oh, and we have a question in the chat box. Do you use any straw or hay in the roost for laying?
In our nest boxes, I put sawdust. Yeah, so those nest boxes that you saw in the picture, I use sawdust, but folks definitely use straw as well. Yeah, because eggs do get cracked in there, so we do have to clean those boxes out frequently, and the sawdust definitely helps with that. Well, I'll get to the feed actually a little bit later. I was going to talk a little bit about our pastures. So this is a photo that Elizabeth saw that I put on Instagram from the spring. These hens are on a field that, this was a photo from April. They were eating down a cover crop. So chickens, I should back up and say chickens are not ruminants. They're not a cow. They're not a sheep. They don't have 4 stomachs. They can't process grass and turn it into energy like a ruminant can. But they're omnivores, and they'll eat anything that they can find. They love to eat bugs. They love to eat vegetables. They'll even eat mice or snakes. But out here on the pasture, they love to eat the cover crop, eat grass. And so they don't get a lot of actual nutrition or energy from it, but they do get nutrition. They get the chlorophyll, and eating greens, I think, is really the secret to those dark orange yolks that our eggs have. They get just so much vitality from the greens that are in their diet. So we think it's really important to keep them on green pasture. So here they are eating down a cover crop. And I did not have time today to upload a photo of what this field looks like today, but it's incredible. We have, in this exact spot, we have broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage growing that looks just incredible. So about a month after the chickens spread their manure in this field, I'll come out with the tractor and disc it all in, work it into the soil, and I'll prepare beds for planting. We'll give that manure a few weeks to start decomposing. And then, because we don't want that nitrogen from the manure to be too hot, and then we'll plant vegetables. And the organic standards say that you can't harvest a crop after fresh manure has been applied for at least 90 days, and in some cases 120 days. So if it's a crop that touches the ground like a carrot or a head of lettuce, you have to wait 4 months before you can harvest. So that's why we had the chickens out on this field in April, and we haven't harvested a crop yet from this field, but we will in September. So we're able to grow veggies on a field this way without adding any organic fertilizers. It's all cover crops and it's all chicken manure. Yeah, so here's a PowerPoint that here's last year's field of those fall brassicas. We do a lot of things to make sure that we're not contaminating our fields with harmful pathogens from fresh manure. We always put on special boots, special gloves that we only use for the chickens. We always wash our hands between jobs. We make sure the chickens don't get out and make sure they're not walking into our vegetable fields, etc. So because we have our chickens well trained and I have my farm crew well trained, it really works. But we have to be very careful about our rotations to make sure that we're being food safe. And I would say that's probably a reason that a lot of farms don't do what we do, because they want to make sure for food safety concerns. But we are really proving that you absolutely can do this safely and effectively and to the organic standards with a careful rotation and portable electric fences and well-trained chickens and crew members. So yeah, that's kind of like a timeline of how we would grow this beautiful kale. We had this particular field had an overwintered cover crop of crimson and red clover. The chickens came out in April and grazed down that clover. We prepared vegetable beds in May, transplanted crops starting in May all the way through July, and then started harvesting them late in the summer. So I kind of call that my secret sauce. I think that's why our vegetables are so vibrant. But I'm gonna maybe pose a question to the audience. Do you guys know why chicken manure is the best animal manure to fertilize vegetable crops? Remember back in the beginning, I showed you that bag of Nutri-Rich fertilizer that had poultry manure. Does anyone know why poultry manure is the best fertilizer for vegetables compared to horse manure, cow manure, anything else?
Any guesses? I have a guess. Welcome to enter it in the chat box. I'm gonna check here on Facebook Live, see if there's any input.
I find it really fascinating. That's why I'm posing the question to the audience first.
Kelly and Eric said because of the number breakdown. Oh,
that's not the reason. Yeah, that is well, that's not the reason why it has the best spread of nutrients. Yeah, it's got nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, micronutrients. That's what it has, but the question is, why does it have all those nutrients?
Oh, yeah, and then Tim guessed phosphorus, and my guess was nitrogen.
So yeah, so you guys, I guess I didn't pose the question quite the right way. That is what makes chicken manure special. It has more nitrogen and more phosphorus than any other manure. But what's the reason for it? Why does chicken manure have more?
That's a good question. Yeah, because they are such tinier,
Yeah.
farm, but it's the most potent.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you, there's kind of two reasons. There's actually two parts. The first reason, which is maybe a little bit squeamish, but chicken manure is the only manure that has the urine and the feces together. They poop and pee at the same time. So, as you may know, urine has more nitrogen and phosphorus than just manure. So because the urine is mixed in with the manure, it's got that nitrogen, it's got that phosphorus. So a little bit icky, but it's true. No other animal manure has the poop and pee mixed together in one product. Now, the second reason is we are feeding our chickens grain. So I'm going to show you the feed that the chickens get. So they're kind of processing this energy that's coming from other farms through their bodies, and through the magic of biology, they're pooping it out. So a cow, by contrast, is eating grass on a pasture. So the cow is not really getting nutrients that are coming from somewhere else. They're just consuming nutrients that are already there, and they're processing them through their rumen. So the chickens are getting the benefit of being omnivores and eating food that is coming from various sources as they're processing it through their body. Here's that clover I was talking about, the chickens peck through that we grow as a cover crop. We've teamed up with WSU Puyallup to do some of these cover crop trials. I will actually say that cover crops are the hardest crop that I grow on my farm. It's not vegetables, it's not tomatoes, it's not even carrots, it's cover crops. It's really challenging to grow a good stand of cover crop, and we've been working with WSU Puyallup to try to figure out when and what and how to get these cover crops to thrive. Here's some other amazing results from these chicken manure fertilized fields. Some of our fields, I will say, we actually fallow all summer. So this particular field, they're pecking down some radicchio that survived the winter here in the foreground. And this field was going to get a summer cover crop. So it's not actually going to get any vegetables at all. we use buckwheat as our best summer cover crop. We've also used peas, oats, vetch, all kinds of things, mixes. But the reason we follow the chickens with a cover crop is we're trying to capture all that goodness of their manure, all those nutrients, and hold them for the next vegetable crop. So the cover crop, that buckwheat, is actually uptaking the nutrients from the chicken manure and holding it in the plant. And so when we mow in that buckwheat and reincorporate it into the ground, those nutrients are kind of being re-released for the next vegetable crop. So we kind of use the cover crops not only to build carbon and organic matter, but also to hold on to the nutrients from the chicken manure. So there's a beautiful stand of buckwheat from a couple of years ago. We've got a similar stand out there right now. Some fava beans that we've experimented with as a cover crop over the winter that have done really well for us. Yeah, really cool. We do have 2 sheep, Bilbo and Snowflake. We try to do a rotation where the sheep actually go mow down the pasture ahead of the chickens, and then the chickens follow them because chickens don't like tall grass. So the idea is the sheep would mow it down to a good height for the chickens, and then the chickens would peck through the, all the flies and bugs that might accumulate on the sheep manure as some extra protein for them, as well as disrupt any parasite cycles that the sheep might be afflicted by. So it's called multi-species grazing to try to keep a healthy pasture. You try to mix poultry with livestock. The only problem there is we have 2 sheep and 450 chickens. So we don't quite have the right ratio to achieve a mixed multi-species grazing regime. So it only works for 2 glorious months of August and September, but we've got the sheep out right now ahead of the chickens. So it works in August and it works in September.
We have a couple questions.
Yeah.
How do you feel about bee pollen? We add organic pollen pellets because we were told that it's super beneficial.
To the feed.
Yes.
Nice. Well, I'm just about to talk about feed, so I will I'll incorporate that in my discussion. I haven't used bee pollen, but I'm sure that would be a healthy supplement for chickens. Yeah, there's a lot of protein in there as well, I think, as well as just, keeping them healthy.
Yeah, and
so,
we have
yeah,
2 questions from the live stream. Don't hens and roosters get disoriented if they're often moved so that they can roost and feed in their home?
Great question. So chickens are totally creatures of habit. If any part of their day or life is disrupted, they have a really hard time with it. So you're exactly right that disrupting their daily routine would really affect them. So the key to my rotation system is every night the chickens go back into the coop, that mobile coop, and we don't move them until the evening. And we close the doors, drive the coop to the next spot. And then when we open the doors in the morning, wherever a chicken starts their day in the morning, that's where they're going to go back to at night. So as long as you move them at night, there's really no disruption to their life.
Oh, very cool. Oh, and another question, do you integrate a compost pile?
Oh yeah, you're going to see some amazing compost photos. That's at the end of my show. That's actually the highlight of my presentation.
Yay!
But yeah, getting back to the scratch and peck feed, it is sold at Marlene's, and I can't recommend it highly enough. It's a whole grain feed. So most chicken feed, I would say 99% of chicken feed in America is corn and soy. And that soy has to be cooked to be palatable for chickens. So it's usually cooked and then bonded with like molasses or something and made into a pellet. So everything is ground up and highly processed. A whole grain feed, like scratch and peck, has whole grain wheat, whole grain oats, different grains, and it has cracked. You can get it with or without corn, depending on how you feel about corn, but it's certified non-GMO. So cracked corn, whole or cracked peas for protein, and it has flaxseed meal for protein as well. So a really natural protein source. So certified organic, all from Northwest certified organic farms as well. So the Scratch and Peck, I've been working with them since the beginning. They pay their employees well. It's a great company based in Mount Vernon, and the feed is expensive, but you get what you pay for, and it really is a product worth supporting. So pick it up at Marlene's. We actually ferment our Scratch and Peck feed. So you can see we use a 5-gallon bucket. We just fill it with water, soak it overnight, and we stir it once a day to keep it aerated. And there's natural lactobacillus in the feed. And so those beneficial bacteria multiply. They unlock enzymes that make the feed more digestible. And so if you just feed a chicken like whole grain wheat that's dry, a lot of it's just going to pass through their system and they're not going to actually get all those nutrients. If you ferment it, it actually unlocks protein. It unlocks nutrients that they wouldn't otherwise have access to in their guts. We also feed them dry feed. We don't just ferment the feed, we do a mix because, as you know, chickens don't have teeth, they have gizzards, and they actually eat rocks. We feed them rocks because we don't have any rocks in our field. It's called grit. And their gizzards actually grind up the feed so that they can digest it. And it's been proven that if you feed chickens whole grains, they have a healthier gut, a healthier digestive system, because you're forcing them to use their gizzards to process the feed. If you only give them, chicken feed pellets with corn and soy and molasses, they're never having to work their gizzards, and it can lead to health problems. And our chickens have been incredibly healthy as a result of this regime. We really don't supplement with a lot of those sort of home remedies. I hear about apple cider vinegar, I hear about garlic, all these different things. Like, we just don't need that stuff. Our chickens are super healthy. And they're out on the pasture, so they're getting exposed to the microorganisms in the soil. When they do their little dust baths, they're just throwing microorganisms all over their feathers, and those organisms in the dirt are helping keep them healthy, helping keep parasite loads down, etc. Like, it just keep your chickens out on the dirt in their natural environment, and they're going to stay healthy. So here's my son Everett stirring the feed. There we are, mixing the ferments. It's pretty cool, really simple. In the winter, we do bring them into the barn. We actually we got a grant to have the runoff from our barn drain to the wetland so that we don't have a wet barnyard in the winter. This is us putting in the pipe. And we put down a whole lot of mulch around the barn area to capture the manure so it doesn't run off, so the nitrates don't run off into the waterways from excess manure. And we do let them run through our high tunnels that grow our vegetables for a few weeks in the winter to fertilize those tunnels. And then we have a clean, dry space in the barn for them to roost and lay eggs. And you can see we turn the lights on in there. I do have the lights on a timer. Chickens are daylight sensitive. And so if you wake them up a little early in the winter with some artificial light, they will lay much better than if you just let them sleep for 17 hours like our Washington winters. So we do give them some artificial light. I know some purists don't believe in that, but we still let our chickens sleep 11 hours a night. So that's a whole lot more sleep than I get. And with 13 hours of daylight in December, our chickens lay almost like summer. And so I think it's a good compromise. I'm still letting them get a little rest in the winter, but they're still laying eggs so that we can supply our customers with a really great product year round. So the highlight of the presentation is the compost, but are there any questions about overwintering chickens or artificial lighting or anything like that before I get into the compost?
Oh, yes, there is a question on the live chat. Will you begin to change over to biodynamic agriculture? Demeter certified ?
Yeah. So I've read a lot of Rudolf Steiner. I've read his lectures on biodynamics that he gave in the 1920s back in Austria. And I found it fascinating. And I do feel like we've implemented some biodynamic principles on our farm. But I don't think I'm ever going to get biodynamic certified. And I don't actually 100% believe in some of the spiritual elements to the biodynamics. So yeah, I've taken a lot of Steiner's teachings because I think they're amazing. The guy was so well educated in science and nature and sort of agricultural traditions from pre-industrial times that it's really fascinating to read his stuff, but I don't believe in some of the stuff. So no, I'm never going to get biodynamic certified, but I do find it fascinating. So for example, our compost is not biodynamic inoculated in any way. Steiner talks about using things like deer bladders and cow horns and different particular herbs that do have some really elemental iron and things like that to inoculate and enliven your compost piles. And it's super fascinating. But I haven't taken it to that level ever before. Other questions?
Not that I can see here.
All right, compost. So you saw this barn. Is there a question?
Oh, I think she was saying that Demeter certified is used widely in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah, Steiner was from Austria. Yeah. So here's our barn. Now it's a small space for 300 chickens. This is just where they roost at night. In the daytime, they go outside, but they poop a lot at night. So you can see I put straw down in the barn, and every week we add another layer of straw. It's called deep bedding. So what we're doing is the straw provides carbon and the manure provides nitrogen. And in order to create good compost, you want a carbon to nitrogen ratio of about 30-1. So we add a lot of straw because there's a lot of nitrogen in that manure. And at the end of the winter, we've got a really thick straw and manure bedding that I scrape out of the barn. Here is the tractor scraping the manure out, and we make a great big pile. And here's a couple photos of those piles. You can see by my left hand, the bigger pile, that's a pile that was just made with some fresh manure and straw from the barn. And then the pile by my right hand, or the pile that my son Everett is climbing down, that's finished compost a year later. So every week for a few months, we will turn that compost pile to aerate it. So we're doing aerated compost. We're adding oxygen to the pile so the microorganisms can do their job breaking it down. And so our compost, you can see, gets super hot, 160 degrees. It only needs to be 131 degrees to kill bad pathogens. So as long as you keep it 131 degrees for the required number of weeks, you've killed off any potential bad bacteria or pathogens, and then you're going to have a really good usable compost to spread on your farm. It's actually interesting. The biodynamic compost is actually more like a cold compost. So the ingredients that are in the biodynamic mix, it tends to not get as hot as this chicken manure mix, which I find kind of interesting. The nice thing about the hot composting is it gets so hot it kills weed seeds too. So your compost is not going to be spreading a bunch of weeds in the field. And so we are really proud of our compost. A little bit goes a long way because it's got all that chicken manure in it. It's incredibly fertile compared to municipal compost. The compost you would get from like Cascade Compost from the Pierce County solid waste program, like it's mostly like yard trimmings and landscape waste, yard waste, and it's not nearly as nutrient rich as our compost. We also put our veggie scraps in there, which also is very nitrogen rich. So it's a really fertile compost that we selectively spread around our farm. And the way I figured out to do it is I built a 3-sided box. really simple box that we can use our tractor to load up. The compost is super heavy, so I can only get that box about a third full, and it weighs like 2,000 pounds. And then we drive the tractor down a bed. There's me and Everett spreading the compost. Our beds are 5 feet wide, 30 inch tops. So the box is 30 inches wide. So we can just scoop the compost right onto the surface of the bed and work it into the soil for our vegetables. And it works amazingly well. So here we are spreading compost. And you know, I could go into the details of our soil tests, but it's pretty amazing to see the results of adding compost. The soil test on the top is no compost added, a bed of squash, and the soil test on the bottom is a bed that had compost added. You can see the organic matter percentage went up from 3.4 to 3.7. The phosphorus is much higher because the chicken manure. The calcium is higher too from the chicken manure. It even raised the pH of the soil because manure, I think, is acidic. So actually all good things for vegetables. But we're learning a lot. We're working with local Pierce Conservation District on soil testing and manure management. And I've been learning a lot the last couple of years about managing nitrogen and growing good compost, etc. So I'm going to bring my face back to the screen so we can chat. That was exactly an hour. How good was that?
That was perfect. So we have a couple questions in the chat. Looks like from Kelly and Eric. I shovel and shift my chicken run and end up with a beautiful dark and soft dirt. Do I need to wait 90 to 120 days to start growing with that, or no?
That is a great question. The answer is no. There's a big difference between fresh manure and finished compost. So what you guys are doing is the right thing. You guys are aerating your chicken manure compost and you're actually composting it. And so you're making a compost product that, depending on how you do it, is aged compared to fresh manure. So I would say, to be safe, you want to say 90 to 120 days from when you first started sifting that fresh manure, or when fresh manure was added. That would be your safest bet. But yeah, finished compost can be applied and you can plant and harvest the next day, as long as that compost is properly finished and aged. Yeah, the rule only applies to fresh manure.
Perfect, thank you. And feel free, folks, to unmute yourselves, turn your cameras on. This is an interactive platform. Now, there was a couple of questions. Oh, there we go. Tim, did you have a couple of questions?
I have one question, if I may. I don't have 500 chickens. We have like 6 or 7 chickens. But do you ever find your chickens that they aren't laying in the box, that they'll start laying in the yard? Or is that ever a problem? How do you get that? And what do you do about that if that happens? Because our chickens are just free range. They're just wandering and then come back and roost in the evening. But do they ever stop laying in the roost?
Yeah, I find that chickens are really creatures of habit. So if one hen gets a habit of laying eggs somewhere else, it's hard to break that habit. In the wintertime, you know, because we have our chickens up by the barn, there's always a chicken or two that gets out of the fenced area and starts laying eggs somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, in a apple bin in the barn or something, you know, where I don't want it to be laying. And once that hen gets programmed to want to lay their eggs there, she'll do anything in her power to get back to that spot. So yeah, the only thing we're really able to do to break that cycle is when we transition our hens from the pasture back into the barn, I do lock them into that barn space for a couple days. So they're basically forced. There's nowhere else they can go except lay in those nest boxes. So that kind of reestablishes the habit of laying in the box. And then I'll let them back outside every day. So then for that rogue hen who started laying off somewhere else, I would recommend confining her to an area where she has to lay in the box for a few days. And then once she's reestablished that habit, you should be fine.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you ever allow the hens to go ahead and brood over their eggs so that they can actually have little chicks? And I just feel it's a lot of forcing, and there's so many, and they're not a lot of their natural habitats. I'm sorry to say, I know you're doing good things, better than bigger ones, corporate egg farming, but there's a lot of forcing and moving that's not natural behavior. But anyway, my first question is, do you allow them to actually bring an egg, their one, or for sure one at least, or their little group, so they'll have their little chicks, so they'll get that satisfaction on a animal reproduction cycle for them naturally? Thank you.
Yeah. So the only time that we've had baby chicks was one winter where a hen got into the other barn and I didn't know about it until she had hatched a whole bunch of chicks. We had a fun surprise one morning when we went into the sheep barn. But no, I think that in terms of the sustainability of the system, the biggest flaw in the commercial system that we are still a part of and we haven't been able to break ourselves away from is the hatcheries. So we buy day-old just born baby chicks from a hatchery, and they're shipped overnight in a box to our farm or to the post office. So we raise them from the day after they're born. But we purchase them from a hatchery. And as you probably know, if you're a male hen, or if you're a male chicken, hatched at a hatchery, your life is not going to end well. So we are still complicit in that system. The choice I've made as a farmer is I don't have time to incubate and brood my own baby chicks. And I kind of have to have all of them at once. We can't have like baby chicks being born throughout the season on our farm in order to be able to maintain our flocks and maintain our production. So I could invest in an incubator and try to hatch my own eggs, which would get me away from the hatchery system. But I haven't made that investment. It's mostly just a time commitment thing. Like as a vegetable grower, I just don't have the time to hatch my own chicks. We would also have, all those roosters, and we would want to raise them to an age where we could sell the roosters or sell the meat. So that would be an additional job on our farm. So I just haven't committed myself to that. There is something though called the slow poultry movement that I have been following. And what they're trying to do with slow poultry is get more farms to hatch chicks and raise them the right way from that hatchery stage. And so there aren't enough yet slow poultry producers who can sell me the 300 baby chicks that I need to sustain my farm. But the movement is spreading across the country, and we're trying to find like a better hatchery so we can break away from that system. Yeah, and that's kind of where we're at with that.
Yeah,
the other thing, yeah,
thank
go
you.
ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I'm interested in that. Maybe I'll be one of the suppliers because I believe in the natural habitat and the cage free. It doesn't seem like these are cage free. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention is that the certification in Europe is often Demeter certified, and because Rudolf Steiner had such a wide range of activities, of course, one was spiritual, but the agriculture course and the agriculture is very specific, and it's not a cold compost. I don't know what you mean, but they do have the temperature regulated up to 150. I think it's 5 to
Oh.
10 days. So there is a hot compost, so it's not exclusively cold. But just wanted to
Yeah.
clarify that point. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I was misinformed. I visited a biodynamic farm in Mendocino, and I thought I remembered that about their compost, but I was mistaken.
Yeah, thank you for correcting that. I attended a workshop for a whole week on hands-on, including shoveling the shit, and we buried the horn manure. It's just phenomenal concepts, very natural, and it's been used in Europe for years. Yes, he was from Austria, but he lectured throughout Europe. So it's been used, and that's why most people come back from Europe and say, why does the food taste so good? And it's usually because it's so much fresher and they understand those old ways. And some use the actual biodynamic methods, and they end up being Demeter certified. So anyway, thank you so much. I
That's
hope to
very
do
cool.
that for my farm. Okay, thank you.
Well, we had a question. Looks like Kelly and Eric have to leave, but they wanted to ask what the best way to contact you. Would that be your early bird farmer Gmail?
Oh yeah, I should have kept your slide about my contact information, but yeah. So you could forward that onto the chat. Absolutely. Yep.
Perfect. Yay! And then they had a couple other. Also, thank you so much for this. Oh, and then yes, they do have an Instagram. I will share that. Oh, and then I've been watching various homesteading shows on YouTube. Sow the Land, Justin Rhodes, and Holler Homestead, to name a few. And I've learned so much about compost and permaculture. But they were very grateful for the presentation.
All right. I think I've got to head out too. I've got a customer here who needs some more vegetables, so I'm gonna run out and help with that. So I'm so glad you guys were able to join.
Oh, thank you so much, Raleigh. We really appreciate you and Early Bird Farm and all y'all do. Homer said, thanks, Raleigh. Leah said, thanks so much, Raleigh. This was great. And Kelly and Eric said, thank you. And thanks again. This has been a wonderful presentation.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Take good
Thank
care,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Elizabeth.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone.